Okay, so it's time for part 2 of my interview with Mark of the Electric Underground on YouTube. In this segment, be prepared to have your jimmies rustled as I give you the dirt on what drove me to develop my own shoot-'em-up game. If you haven't already, be sure to catch part 1 on my blog, and also check out Mark's channel on YouTube, The Electric Underground. Now, without further ado, here's part 2. Also, a quick apology in advance for any scraping on the microphone.
I'm ready.
Recording now.
Ready for dinner.
Yeah. So now this is where we get a little controversial. It's going to be a little bit more of a two-way interview conversation because I'd like to touch on some of the things. This carries over some of the things that we talked about in part 1. Some of the concepts, some of the ideas of in terms of marketing and the direction of the genre and what the genre needs. And so now we come to the point of necessity. We are both disclosed that we're both working on our own games. And I very much feel, Mark, that I'm working on a game out of necessity. I'm out here and I can't find a game. I'm trying to get back into gaming. I'm trying to enjoy. I almost bought a Nintendo Switch because I wanted to play Breath of the Wild. It looked interesting. And I felt like, I got to get back into gaming. I'm OG. I started with the 2600. Bought the one.
What caused? I'm gonna be a stinker and interview the interviewer. What caused the gap? Like, now I know family life and that type of thing, but even still, sometimes like there could be other factors too. Like, what caused the gap between you're a gamer and then you're kind of I need to get back into it?
Well, here's what it was, and it still is. It's still very very much the case. This is my argument. The game industry, game consoles, gamers, society have all evolved. But the genre hasn't. And I can't, I'm like, why is it, and then I'm making this bold statement, why is it that the shmup genre is the only genre that doesn't get any love from the things like modern hardware, like you said, high frame rates, things like that. There's no love there for the shmup. And for example, I had a Reddit post, and I'll link to that Reddit post with this interview because it's important. I got shredded on Reddit. You know how Redditors are. Because I asked the question.
I've been shredded more times than you can imagine on Discord and Reddit.
Well, the thing,
and the farm.
Well, the idea is that I asked the simple question: when are shmups going to grow up? When are shooters going to grow up? It was a straightforward, and they took it personal. These guys they start kicking me in the ribs and like, what do you mean? How dare you say they haven't grown up? And I said mature. When I say mature, like you said, the game, the people want to give shmups to babies. They want to make it accessible. People want to play it on their mobile device. No, that's not the genre I enjoy. I say in my blog, I'm not, bury me up to my neck and, feed me to scorpions before you give me a mobile shmup. I'm not doing that. So, it's an embarrassment for me to go from playing Raiden and Einhander to having us be on a mobile device and play something that is essentially Twinbee from like it's like, this is terrible. I'm not doing this. And so that's what I feel is that the genre needs a kick in the pants, like you're saying. But I wouldn't encapsulate it as differ from you. I see that there's a dichotomy in the fact that you want to pay homage to the arcade, but you don't want to be limited by the arcade. And I think we can both agree on that. You want enough.
I think mine's a little different because it's not that. So the way I view the arcade is probably a little bit different than probably the people who answered you in the Reddit post. Is a lot of players. I grew up in the arcades, and I do have a lot of attachment to the arcades. But at the same time, I try as hard as I can to resist nostalgia and to resist like sentimentality with these types of things. And I think one part of the arcades that gets very mixed up in people's heads, that in their own heads, and it happened for me sometimes, is that we confuse like nostalgia and legacy with genuinely good design at times. And the thing is that when I say pay attention to the fundamentals, learn from the arcades, I don't say that as like a nostalgia return to the past. I mean that these arcade developers, Cave, Rising, even Psycho, they were figuring shit out in game design, ideas, lessons, concepts that have been lost in the mainstream. Shit out that the mainstream gaming world still does not have been able to, has not figured out. And so these are lessons that we should learn and then export from the arcade because these are concepts and there's so much genius on these games, but we kind of tie that too much to the legacy and the nostalgia. So that's kind of my mentality. There's a lot of brilliance here, but we could take these lessons and then export it into a wider game design too.
Gotcha. And see, that's the thing. Now, imagine this, for example. I'm suggesting in the game I'm developing, one of the ideas I tossed around was at the opening screen that you actually have to dump credits into it, kind of like a MAME when you launch a game on MAME and it still thinks it's in an arcade cabinet and it's still looking for a coin slot to register. Well, I was very much going to build that into the game experience where people would be like, it's going to be completely lost on, for example, I'm a granddad, by the way. That's how old I am. It would be completely lost on my grandkids, right? They would not understand the mnemonics behind hearing a coin drop into a slot. That wouldn't make any sense to them. But for people like myself, and that's the thing when you say for the homies, there's some stubbornness. I admit it. Mark, I'm being open, admitting there's a certain snobbery, but we've been, in my defense, we've been in a desert for so long as far as being able to evolve with society and technology that I'm trying to say, I'm going to give us a game that could, for example, like you said, be released in the arcades today, 2023, has all the great graphics, high frame rate and stuff like that, but damn, is it an actual arcade game? Do you see what I'm saying? That's kind of that's the kind of lightning in a bottle I'm trying to capture. Am I making sense?
Like a Crimson Clover, maybe.
Something
like that?
Well, give you an example.
So Crimson Clover, I think, is a really good example. And I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but like Crimson Clover is what I would consider like the perfect modern arcade shmup because, funnily enough, the guy who made it, Clover Tack, is like a world record holder in cave games. Like he is one of the most talented shmup players of all time. And then he made a shmup, and this guy knows the genre in and out, obviously. Right. And so it is like a modern style shmup at the way the graphics look and everything like you could walk into an arcade and be like, oh, this is. Now it's kind of old now. It's like a decade old. But when it came out, that was like kind of what Crimson Clover was. And it did get some mainstream crossover, like some channels that never talk about shmups. I remember Super Bunny Hop and stuff talking about Crimson Clover. Yeah. Total Biscuit might have even talked about Crimson Clover. So, that could work. Crimson Clover did it.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, is that now here's the proposition I'm saying. And you brought it up with high frame rate. And this is where I got shredded on Reddit, by the way, is that, okay, I said it, what about photorealism? I'll give you a great example. Are you familiar with the game Cinemora?
Yeah.
Okay. How that looks is fantastic. There are some things that it gets very much right, but it comes off very Euro. And fans of the genre know exactly what we mean when we say Euro. And real quick, I'll leave it to the expert. Can you quickly explain what makes a Euro shmup? I know we could spend an hour talking about it. Real quick, what makes a Euro shmup versus what the rest of the genre for the list?
So we'll nail the fundamentals of what makes a Euro shmup. Step one: Euro shmups do not have tight level design. They often put like the cinematic ideas first. They don't understand the concept of every second in the game matters. Cinemora is very guilty of this. So they'll have sections where the enemy resistance is very low, and then you're literally just flying around, nothing is happening. Then it has like built-in cutscenes, and it's trying to do the cinematic thing, but that you can't put that in shmups because it goes against the whole concept of the genre. And then another thing Euro shmups do is Euro shmups are very, very focused on what I call like specific mechanics, and they underpower the fundamentals. So in Euro shmups, your main shot is usually very weak, and it's like a pea shooter, and it's very unsatisfying. And then they have all these sort of like special weapons that they prefer you to use, ammo counts, because they're getting their ideas from FPS games. So they're okay, like, oh, the shotgun weapon and the shotgun ammo and the special missile upgrades and all that stuff. So they're very focused on specific mechanics rather than the fundamental power of your ship. So your ships are underpowered, and then instead of having what the arcade does, it has very frenetic gameplay. So there's usually higher enemy counts with lower health. Euro shmups have low enemy counts with high health.
Right.
So you'll get like 3 ships on screen, but it takes forever to kill them, and then you're shooting them with a little pea shooter, and it's all very minimal. It's all very restrained.
Right.
It's usually pretty slow paced as well. And then they tend to have like really small. I'm looking at Cinemora right now. They also tend to have like too proportional of bullets and enemies and ships. So in Japanese shmups, it's not proportional, but it's way better in terms of game design. Like your ship is actually fucking giant in most Japanese games. If you think about it in terms of in proportion to the background and stuff, it's like a pretty big ship. But that's satisfying to have like a nice visually big thing to look at. Same thing with your bullets. Your bullets are like the size. These bullets are huge that come out of your ship. The lasers are massive. Everything's big, but it works because it gives a real visceral feel to it. The enemy bullets, the bullets are big. Everything is bigger. Whereas in Euro shmups, the ships are tiny, the enemies are tiny, the explosions are tiny, the bullets are tiny.
Right.
It feels like you're watching zoomed out. You're like miles away watching an air fight. Whereas in Japanese shmups, it's more close in, it's tight. You're right on top of the action. The explosions. Cave's my favorite because they do explosions on top of explosions. So you'll blow up a tank and the tank will explode, and then the explosion of the tank will explode, and like parts will fly off. And so Euro shmups tend to have very minimal damage animations, very minimal deaths. They usually just poof, poof. They're very restrained, and so it makes a very stale, boring experience. And there's tons of other stuff like inertia and all that, but see, I think those are kind of the hallmarks of a Euro shmup.
And see, that's what happens when you move to the what you call pseudo 3D or 2.5D, however you want to phrase it, where you've got a 3D rendering, which Ikaruga proved that you could do that. You could do 3D
Silvergun
rendering
as well.
Silvergun, yeah, 3D rendering and have just as much intensity and density as a traditional 2D shmup. But then what happens is that with Cinemora, you get the photorealism, but then the gameplay is so weak. That's what people associate with photorealism. And so then they downplay, and that's what I got shredded on Reddit, because I said photorealism. Can we get a game that has photorealistic shading?
I think the reason why people instantly went, ooh, with that is because you can't... it might be able to be done, but like, I don't think you can quite capture compelling shmup gameplay while also being like totally realistic. Because like in real life, bullets are tiny and fast.
Right.
And in real life, dogfights are like 3 shots and someone dies.
Yes.
And in real life, explosions are very minimal. It's so the abstraction of that stuff with shmups being less realistic, I think that's why people really, their nails go ee when they hear realism, because they're not going to get the more visceral stuff in realistic formats.
But see, to me, the obvious answer is this. Take the big explosions, take the, quote, big bullets, take all of that and just render it photoreal. That's all I'm saying. It seems
Yeah.
like a simple proposition. Again, now you're on to why I decided, okay, I should make this game. Because I can see it in my head. I can see how you would take the same, like take Raiden, for example, something as straight up. And by the way, folks, you can't get more. If you want to know what a shooter is, play Raiden. Done. Go play Raiden and get it on MAME or an emulator, the first Raiden, as a matter of fact. Get to the third level.
I have a funny story about Raiden, which is when I was a kid, the only shmup I ever played was Raiden because that was just the only one at the arcade that I went to. And so I actually assumed the genre of shmups was just Raiden for most of my life. And so if I ever saw a shmup that wasn't Raiden, I would say, oh, that's like Raiden. So I guess in my mind, shmups were Raiden likes. Because Raiden was the shmup in my head.
Yes.
Because it's the only shmup I ever played. It's the only shmup I ever saw, and it was good. So I was like, oh, that's a Raiden game. If I ever saw a shmup, I'm like, oh, that's like Raiden.
But it was the
So it's just funny you
defining.
mentioned that.
It was the defining shmup. It really was. It was
For North America, because a little fun
That's true.
shmup
That's
history
true.
is like Cave did not come to North America, but the Raiden boys, they like invaded North America. Like even now, you can go to a random pizza shop in Idaho and you can still find a Raiden cabinet in there. I mean, like their marketing team, whatever they did, their distribution team were top notch. They got that motherfucker everywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so based on our experiences in life, for me, I'm like you, Raiden was the shooter. It is still the defining. And I would say for anybody coming to the genre, or really want to understand what we're talking about, just play Raiden 1. Try to get to level 3 with on run credit. And so that being said, if you took a game as basic and straightforward as Raiden and made it photoreal, and again, just the rendering, and let's start there. The rendering being shaded with, you've got Unreal Engine, which I'm building my game in.
It's like a Tarantino thing where like Tarantino films, they're live action, but like the effects are like
there you go,
wild. It's like I get what you're saying.
And then now let's address the bullets, because so now I'm getting into controversy. We're already starting with the photorealism, and that's one of the things. That's one of the taboos. The next would be the bullets, and so you say bullet hell. What I want to move away from, and when I'm wanting to evolve above, are what I call chiclets, which are little tiny floaty bullet dots that just float and waft across the screen. Sometimes you have streaks, sometimes you have bullets of, different geometry. You have a streak or something like that on the screen, but I'm specifically talking about the little drifty dots. And by the way, and I have to admit,
like Toho bullets?
Yeah, Toho bullets. Now, let me say this. Okay. Now, I will, micro disclaimer here. I do understand that that's what makes Raiden. Like those bullets that you run into that some tank off in the left-hand corner or
those little yellow bullets.
Yeah, where there are tanks crawling out from under a tree. You know what I'm talking about. Crawls from under a tree, fires an unassuming bullet in a direction and it's almost like it knew you needed to move in that direction. It's firing a bullet.
Raiden is really mean.
Yeah, right where it knows you need to move, that's where it starts firing its bullets. And so I appreciate that about Raiden, but that's Raiden. If we're looking forward into 2022, 2023, can we do it without the little dots? Can we give you a bullet shower or pressure, enemy offense, enemy firepower, without it being packaged in the form of little dots that float across the screen, or in my case, looking at all these? And I think it's brilliant. I saw you playing Ketsui. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
I saw you playing that recently. You posted an unlisted video on YouTube. And man, I'm like, this guy it's like an art. It's like watching a ballet dancer. It's like a surgeon. It's amazing how you were dodging it out. And I'm like, he's capturing the essence of what that genre is about. Can you do the same thing with bullets that traverse the screen? And here's what I propose, Mark. If you see footage of real world footage of a war, and you see the streaks of tracer rounds across the sky.
Yes.
And then
I love real life dogfights.
And then number two, when you talk about beam weapons, a laser is a binary proposition. It's on or off. It's like a light switch. Somebody fires a laser at you. It doesn't travel across the screen. It's the screen. It goes.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
on. It's like a rod. It's might as well be a physical barrier. And so that's the idea, is that how do you do that? And that's my challenge. I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do for the game I'm developing. People will be surprised that you're able to get, I was like, okay, well, the bullets are traversing at bullet speed. Now, here's what I'm going to say to that. In my defense. You got to take your first person shooter, your Call of Duties, your Battlefields. They're ostensibly dodging real bullet fire. The bullets are moving at an appreciable pace to real live bullets, wouldn't you say? If you're playing a first person shooter and there's a sniper, if he pulls the trigger, you're dead. Am I wrong?
Hit scan or whatever.
Yeah.
I think the Call of Duty games do actually fire actual bullet objects, though. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but I'm saying they move at an appreciable rate commensurate to the laws of. And so what I'm trying to do is take that and steal it from them and move it to the shooter genre and do it in a way where the gamer doesn't feel it's unfair. They still feel they have a fighting chance, because like it sounds, as I say it, it sounds insane, but I know it can be done. What do you think on that? Just your thoughts on. I mean, I know I'm setting myself up for a shred, but I think it can be done. That's part of my crazy vision.
I think what you'd have to do in a situation like that is the reason why it works in first-person shooters is because first-person shooters have cover systems, and that's how you basically outmaneuver your enemies in like Call of Duty. I played some Call of Duty somewhat competitively, not amazingly, but like the idea of Call of Duty, it's like really you're able to have a lot of spatial awareness of who's where and why. Of course, actually aiming at people, but really, what saves your ass is cover, right?
Exactly.
So if someone's coming at you and you're shooting, you don't actually like dodge the bullets, Neo style in the Matrix. You dive under cover, like oh fuck, and you dive for cover. So I think you can make it work, but you'd have to come up with some sort of cover system.
Yes,
I would imagine.
That's level design. Now you've got it. That can be taken care of in level design. So there's a scene. This is going to be somewhat esoteric, but follow me here. There's a scene in Attack of the Clones, the Star Wars, second of the Star Wars prequels, whereby Boba Fett or Jango Fett is on his way to Geonosis, the planet that has rings around it. It reminds me of that level in Darius with the planet with the rings and the asteroids. And so he flies into an asteroid belt, and Obi-Wan Kenobi chases after him in his Jedi Starfighter. That dogfight in that asteroid belt is what I'm trying to capture. I'm trying to capture that moment when Jango Fett was on his tail and hammering down on him. And you're going to have to reference the scene. I'm saying that what the scene is. I'm giving it to you very specific.
I'm gonna watch it right now as you talk.
No, go ahead. It's worth it. And this is
Jango Fett versus Obi-Wan.
Yes.
Here we go.
It's beautiful the way
I'm watching it right now.
And I'll wait for this. I'm going to stop the recording. I'll let you watch.
Okay. So they're fighting each other in like an asteroid field, and they're he's dodging through the
and
the tracer or the homing missile.
See, the thing is that the asteroids are providing natural cover. So he's dodging in and out of the asteroids, using them if you use them strategically, and that's what I'm getting at. Now, let me say I'm giving kind of a. I have to explain this very carefully. Obviously, moving at the speed of a spaceship through an asteroid field is going to be very difficult for a player, right? If you're moving at a significant speed, obviously, that's going to be a really difficult task to dodge the asteroids and laser fire. But if you do it strategically, and this goes down to level design, you design it in a way where you could use the asteroids for cover. So the enemies are bombarding you like Jango Fett was on his tail and just hammering down on him. But he was able to weave in and out of and you give the player some grace in being able to move and weave around these asteroids. And they start to understand, Mark, I can use these for cover. Their firepower, it's not permanent. They eventually chip away through the asteroid. But I'm able to weave in and out long enough to get my bearings and not get blasted to bits. And maybe after a certain point, they run into an asteroid and blow up. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that's
I'm starting to picture this, and what I'm picturing is that I think could be compelling is if you had a very, very fast scroll speed. So
yes,
the so you're having like a really fast scroll speed, and that way maneuvering through the asteroids would feel very visceral, and then that would be I could see that being kind of like an escape sequence some shmups have, but have it be more supercharged. I'm not sure how you're fighting other things as far as like what you're are you strictly avoiding? Are you how are you returning fire?
so that's a good question. So in my game, so what I'm thinking is this. Now, I'll give you the game mechanics real quick. Top level. If I do this game right, it will play like Astabreed. Am I pronouncing that right? Astabreed.
I'm not good at pronunciation.
But
I
you know,
have no idea.
but
Asterbreed, I think that's how you say it, yeah.
yeah, Astabreed, and then it would be that mixed with Devil May Cry, and so the you play as you're familiar with Robotech and some of the Gundams that transform between a
Yeah.
space jet and a robot.
Yeah.
That's a huge mechanic in my game, and so I'm suggesting that when you're in interceptor mode, which is a space jet, your forward fire is most important. So it's rated. You've got the expert.
Are we horizontal or vertical?
This is going to be multi-view, so it's going to change. It's going to be very much like Astabreed,
Asterbreed.
where,
Okay.
where it
All right.
changes orientation. Like
Based on what you're doing,
See, Ironhander had some of that, and actually R-Type Delta, which is absolutely fantastic. There's
Yeah,
another-
Delta's really good.
Oh my
Yeah, Delta's
gosh,
really
I want to head bow to just mentioning R-Type Delta. That being said, it's going to be 2.5D. Some things will be on rails at some points, but again, I hate to say it, Sign Mora came very close in its presentation. It just was so Euro. I'm like, I can't do this.
But I'm looking at okay, so my problem with Sign Mora's presentation is it's very flat. I mean, it's detailed, but it has like a staleness to it.
Yes.
And I'm watching Asterbreed, and I think its presentation is much better.
Yes. Astabreed is so. What I think I want to get away from with Astabreed. Now we get back into design philosophy. Astabreed looks fantastic, and it looks like a damn anime, and it's amazing. I was showing my brother, and he's like, "Oh, that looks really cool," and I agree with you, but it violates what I want to do in terms of photorealism, right? I can't. I don't want to do both. I'm being honest. If I'm going to have the photorealistic effect and take
Are
advantage.
we talking like mech type of photorealism, like gritty mech, or are we talking like World War II era planes, or what's it gonna look like?
Mech. It's going to be futuristic. So
Okay.
very much Gundam. Very much. I'm unabashedly, unashamedly, very much Robotech, very much Gundam. But
Have you ever
rendered
played this game called Mech Assault?
Mech Assault.
Now, it was on the Xbox, and it's not a shmup,
Okay.
but by damn, I loved it. I don't even know how good it is. And Microsoft Studios made it, but I am picturing now this is old school style graphics, but I'm picturing it maybe looking something like Mech Assault.
Yes, very much. Very much,
Okay.
very much with a i.e., if you saw how Battlefield 1 rendered, and now I think games have gotten even better, but Battlefield 1 had a very rich, very photoreal sense to it. It had a very strong sense of, you know what I'm saying? That sort of,
I'm looking at it right now.
yeah, Battlefield 1 had just a really,
Oh yeah, that looks fantastic.
And
I'm
so-
looking at Battlefield 1.
so now take a Robotech mech or a Battletech, sorry, I said Battletech, that dates me. I already admitted I had grandkids, but anyway, take a Gundam style mech and
Yeah.
situation, and say what happens if it's in the real world, and then the only thing that Japanese shooter about it are the weapons. Put the Japanese shooter weapons on it, and then see what would happen if you unleashed hell in a game that looks photoreal. I think that would be compelling. I think I'd have an argument there.
Yeah, or like Rambo style, where everything blows up and it blows up 5 times because it's Rambo, and like
exactly. See,
the-
yes, you keep,
Rambo carries like a fucking I don't know. I don't know the name of that gun, but that fucking like chain-fed gun.
Yeah, the
That's
Vulcan.
badass.
Yeah.
Giant bullets and shit like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're keeping all of the tropes in terms of the explosions. You saw the explosions in that sequence I was talking about. They're not little pea shooter explosions. Those are not little pea shooter. Those aren't Euro. Jango Fett wasn't firing little Euro bullets. No offense. I know it sound. I don't want to sound racist to anybody or anything like that or discriminatory. And when we're just using, we're speaking semaphorically in terms of where you would see these differences if you looked at where the games come from, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
So when we say Euro, we're not talking about the culture. We're talking about
Euro is a design philosophy.
Exactly.
It's not regionally based. Like Gunbane is made by a European Boghog,
Right.
but it is not a Euro shmup because
Right.
it doesn't follow the design philosophy.
So
It is a little unfair, I will say, because Americans are also guilty of this. It's not like Americans make amazing shmups.
Right.
But we just don't make shmups that often, so the poor Europeans get the label. But
And so that's what's going to happen. So here, part of the design philosophy, I'm going to say this. So when you pick up Blasternal, the following things I want to get your attention very quickly. One, it's going to be quick to get into. So you're not going to be a lot in the way of setup screens. You're not going to sit there and, like with the RPGs.
tutorials.
Oh, Lord, no. You're not going to sit there and design your mech and all that stuff. You got to earn that, by the way. Later on, you can purchase decals for your mech, but that's about it. But you're not going to spend.
You know what I miss?
Right.
I'm just throwing suggestions at you right now.
Right.
I was playing, it was a shmup too the other day, and it had like unlockable custom shit for the ships. And it made me think, I miss the days where the developer would just design the ship for me and it would look amazing and I would just want it. I kind of miss those days, rather, because nowadays it's kind of in vogue. Same thing with fighting games, that they do like custom modes and stuff like that. And I know some people love that, so I'm not saying don't include that, but at the same time, me personally, I actually miss the days where I would just see something awesome and be like, let's go with that. Because I'm not great at tweaking things, making them look good.
No,
I miss the days where the developer would just have a badass looking ship and I'm like, oh, I want that. Or a badass looking skin or whatever.
That's not going to be an in-game process for me. I may have an offline process where you can do that, but you pick up the game, you see the title screen, you get into it, and this is what I want people to understand. Number one, the game is going to move fast. There's not going to be anything. There are going to be a couple of slow, pensive levels later on, but starting out, the first few missions that you play will be fast. That'll be the first thing you notice, that shit moves quick. I mean, it's like, and then I posted it in your Discord. I never knew it was around. It was a game based off of Afterburner. It was one of the sequels to Afterburner. It was called Afterburner Climax. I'm like, well, holy shit, here's the look that I'm looking for in terms of, it had a certain photorealism to it, and it moved like lightning. I mean, it was just booking.
That is a really cool game, yeah.
And so
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, it just take a look at how, and the thing that strikes you when you see it, the first thing that strikes you is, damn, this thing is hauling ass. That's
speed,
That's what I want people to feel with Blasternal. And so typically with mech games, everyone expects mechs to lumber around, and we can thank anime for that, because they God bless them, they did a great job of introducing Western culture to the giant robots, right? And they give them some realism in terms of, even with Gundams that have the jets and they do that rocket skating along the ground. That's a separate process, because you're using the boosters to basically hover, and you're getting a boost that way. But when it comes time for them to walk and move, there's a certain heft to them. You know what I mean? There's a mechanical sort of physical. I'm not doing that. These things, the guys are going to sprint like jackrabbits, and that's going to surprise the shit out of the player to see something that in their brain, typically, the brain processes it and says, well, this is a walking tank, but this thing's scrambling around like a damn ninja. Holy shit. And now that gets me to my next point. Power-ups. This is very controversial, sir. And now we're in a deep controversy here. I will not be doing item drops. I'm doing away with them.
I think that's absolutely the correct choice.
There are no item pickups. You're not going to power. You're not, and no buffing. And what do I mean by that? Most games, and let me explain what I'm saying. Most games, there's Raiden's a great example, and I love Raiden. So don't you can't at me for saying this because I absolutely love Raiden. But there are ships that come along that are helper ships that are basically you blow them up and they give you an item drop. It'll be a bomb, it'll be
Yeah.
an incremental upgrade to your weapon, and then you wind up buffing out in Raiden. And then when you buff out in Raiden, you it's like, okay, I'm doing good against these mini bosses and bosses, but then you get hit and killed. Now you're back to your twin gun and you're dead. You got
Yeah, and one thing about Raiden, and this is something about Japanese shmups, is Japanese shmups figured this out because if you go along the Raiden series, it tones that back more and more and more.
right.
Until Cave at the end was like, no, fuck power-ups. Like, so that's what I'm talking about with like the arcade lessons. Like the genre figured this out at some point. Like even Raiden, like if you play Raiden 4,
Yes,
you know,
correct.
they figure out like, okay, that's what I would say one of the biggest weaknesses of the early Raiden games is those stupid power-ups and how you can get what's called Gradius syndrome off of them because you die once and yeah, it's a mess. And what's funny is Boghog pointed this out to me is what a lot of them would do, Cave would do, is they'd actually just lie to you. So in Cave, you have power-ups like in Donpachi and Ryujei and Ketsui, but they don't really do all that much. I mean, visually it looks like, oh wow, that's such a big difference. But the actual damage differences between your power-up levels is not that much.
Yeah, and see
So that's what's funny.
that's
And
what,
then Cave also, it only really affects stage 1 and 2 because after that you can always recover your power-ups anyway. So those really are only relevant for the first 2 stages of the game anyway. So you can just see how the genre got rid of that concept. They minimized it and said, okay, this it just doesn't work.
right, and I'm sticking with this concept of quote photorealism, right? That if in a game that's going to be presented in a photorealism, now mind you, the explosions are hellacious. You're saying your weapons are futuristic and they give a hellacious firepower. So you're giving something that has Battlefield 1 rendering. You've got a Gundam-sized mech out here, but the damn thing moves like a jackrabbit, and the guns are very powerful, Star Trek powerful. You know, it's like, wow, shit, I pulled the trigger. I want the player to appreciate that they don't need, that's what you said with Cave. Cave made it you appreciate, you don't need that power up, dude. We're going to give you the tools necessary, but then you're in it. This is a very, good luck getting past level 1. This is a bullet hell game, very much so. You get into it knowing what you're getting into with Cave, correct? You start with an appreciable weapon, but the enemies have appreciable weapons against you. Is that a fair statement?
Oh yeah. So the way
Oh, audio. Hello?
is
Okay.
your ship is hilariously overpowered if you think about it. Like you're this helicopter from hell. Like your firepower is insane. And Cave figured that out and well other shmup developers figured this out as well, but Cave wasn't the first, but shmups figured out that it's really fun to make your characters glass cannons basically. So your output firepower is absolutely absurd and insane, but it's balanced by the fact that you're this fragile little thing. If something hits you, explode and die.
Right.
And I think that just creates a really engaging dynamic because you're powerful, but you're not invulnerable. So you can
Correct.
still die. It's still scary, but you can just absolutely lay waste to comically large amounts of enemies.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Euro shmups don't do that. Euro shmups have a very restrained, power up and really restrained enemy counts. So that
Exactly.
would be the difference.
Exactly. So I'm glad that you were able to understand that because I thought that would be one of the more controversial aspects of the game, or no item drops, no power ups, and no none of that, no buffing, as I say, where you get so buff. It's like you said, Gradius syndrome. I get the 4 options, and then I'm just, I'm feeling like a veritable demigod until I blow up, and then I'm back to
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So there's that, and then on top of all of that, let me see. We'll go back to my list of grievances. So I said no floaty dots. You were okay with that? That surprised me. No HUD. I'm not going to do a HUD, and what I mean by a HUD is life meters for the enemies, scores popping up the little score counter. When you blow up something, the score pops up. Again, I'm looking for a photorealistic touch here, so I'm not going to have a lot of visual clutter. And that's what I think when you get into games like Asti Breed. Again, for what it is, it's presented perfectly. But to me, if I'm going to go for that battlefield look, there's just too much screen clutter. There's just too much going on the screen. There's too many. I call it. I want to coin this phrase. I hope it catches on. I call it what did I say? Neon unicorn barf.
With the meters and stuff?
Yeah, well, just all the streakiness and well, the meters would be one thing. That's HUD, but all the streaks and flashes and stuff like that. Magical neon unicorn barf is what I say. It's just you know how the Japanese shooters are. A lot of them are based on anime, and anime, in order to convey movement, they add like light streaks in the that are just visual visually superimposed on the screen. Am I making sense? Like somebody swipes a sword or something moves across the screen, it has movement lines. And that comes from having to convey movement. You don't need that if something's photorealistic. You don't need that conveyance of movement because it's going to move. You can actually see it traverse the terrain. So I'll do away with the streaks and the flashes, and I will have no HUD, because I think HUDs get, even in tactical shooters, like the first-person shooters, there's just so much HUD going on, and I know that the player likes to be informed. That's going to be one of the challenges of my game. I'm going to inbuild. I'm not going to telegraph how much health an enemy has. You're going to have to learn that by you shoot them enough and they start smoking, right? I want to indicate it in a different way, Mark. Enemies start smoking and their movement becomes erratic or becomes labored. You know they're injured, you know they're on their last leg. That's how I want to telegraph that an enemy has taken hit damage. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea because it has some pros and I think some cons that might not be super obvious. So like the con of not having some of these HUD type elements isn't so much that you actually need the information. I don't think many players pay that much attention to the information, but it serves as a visual stimulus and a visual reward. A great example of this is in first-person shooters. In Call of Duty, when you kill someone, points pop out of them when you kill them, right? Like you get a little point flash. That is what I would consider a visual reward that is surprisingly adds a lot to your game. You wouldn't think it would, but it's just this really strong visual reward of, oh, you did it. Mission accomplished, here's your points. And it just pops out of them like that.
It's a River City Ransom proposition, right? Enemies burst into coins.
Yes, and another example that I love to use because it takes it to the ultimate level is Crimson Clover. When you blow shit up, they don't just blow up. They blow up and billions of stars bleed out of them. And it's extremely visually rewarding. It's very visually rewarding.
Yeah.
And what you want to be careful about is if you don't have, it's like a balancing act, because if you don't have enough of that, it will actually feel kind of stale. Like it will look realistic, but it will feel stale. And so I think even first-person shooters kind of were thinking about this, and that's why when you shoot someone in the head in Call of Duty, points pop out of them, even though it doesn't quite fit the theme of Call of Duty.
Right.
It just is enough of a visual stimulation.
Yeah, I get you this little shot of, like you said, in terms of tongue-in-cheek, it's like a hit of cocaine. It's that little endorphin kick that you get when you see the score pop up. And I get that. Yeah. Here's how I hope to reward the player if I do it right. Again, imagine this. You're engaging an enemy. You're shooting on them. And by the way, I want to go ahead and divulge, my enemies will not follow patterns. I'll throw that in right now, too, while I'm on this topic. They're not going to come in. They'll come in formation as they come in. They'll fly in maybe in formation. But as they engage, they'll scatter and move, and they'll flank you. And one guy will try to draw you off to the right, while his friend comes in and tries to flank you from the left. You see what I'm saying? You'll get that sort of emergent AI for the enemy attacks. And so that being said, how I'm going to release that endorphin is two ways. One, like I said, as you hammer down on an enemy, they'll start to cripple. So their movement will become erratic. So you can imagine you're engaging with your spacecraft, another spacecraft. When you start hitting it, it starts smoking from its wing starts to buckle. Then maybe the wing breaks away and gives way, and it starts to do a death spiral. And as it tumbles away, it gives that death explosion, that pop. It's going to explode in such a way, and that's going to be my endorphin kick. When the enemy crackles with a huge sort of pyrotechnics, very percussive, fireworks-like explosion, that's what will be my score pop. And that's what I'm going to give you. That's my shot of cocaine for you in my game, will be how the enemies will labor away, even big enemies. That's going to be one of the big rewards for somebody if they are able to take out a moderately sized, let's say frigate-sized ship that's considerably bigger than yours, and it lumbers away like a big brontosaurus dying on its last leg, and then once it gives up the ghost and explodes, it's gonna rock the entire screen. It's gonna blow clouds away, kind of like Satima's punch in One Punch Man. It's gonna part clouds. Do you get where I'm coming from? That's what's gonna raise the hairs on the back of people's heads, and that's what I'm gonna use in the stead, because I gotta give them something, right? Like, you're right. There's got to be that shot of endorphin, but I'm going to do it in a very artistic. It's going to be part of the level design, and part of the aesthetic is that when certain enemies drop, they'll do a death spiral. They'll do a death. Everybody loves that when one of the ships flies.
Oh, you should do that sound effect where it's like,
yeah. They're going to take a dive, black smoke, and then pop off in the distance. But that pop is going to be so satisfying. These parts go flying. That's one of the cool things about Raiden 2. Even though it was chaotic.
Oh, yeah, the parts.
Oh, yeah. So there's that.
One of the best shmups for this, you should definitely just reference footage of it, is Battle Gorega. The enemy ship explosions in that game it's a pixel-based game, but it is so detailed. Like, parts will fly off, and what's funny is when you die and you ram into stuff, the parts of your ship can damage stuff. So you can ram into things and blow up your ship, and it'll actually damage them and stuff. It's really cool.
It won't be a one-shot proposition for you. I'll at least say that. Like, when you get hit, your ship's going to be tough. You'll be able to bounce off of the background. You'll be able to, they'll be able to take damage, but enough concentrated damage will blow you up. But minor damage. So what the player's not going to know up front, and anybody listening to this is going to be spoiled on it, because you'll find this out as you play. What they won't know when they first start playing is you'll be able to soak a little bit of damage from the bad guys. So some of that streaky, fast bullet time, real physical tracer round that I'm talking about that are moving at real physical speed, you'll be able to take maybe several of those hits and be okay. And if you think about it, it's not too dissimilar from first-person shooters, right? I watch my grandson play first-person shooters, and he'll get shot 4 or 5 times, and like that, an ordinary person would just fall over and die. No one's going to take a hit from an assault rifle and still be running around. Yeah, he's got a flak jacket on, but still, dude, after about 4 or 5 times getting shot, all it does is the screen turns red and you hear the guy huff, screen shakes. Oh, I'm like, oh my Lord, he should be dead right now. You know what I mean?
He's done. Yeah, I think there's a mode you can play in some of these games where you actually do get one shot. It is so hard. You just get one shot, dead.
Yeah, and so I'll steal that from the first person shooters. You'll be able to soak a couple of shots before you start yourself showing some signs of damage and some sort of laboriousness from taking damage. But so it's not a one shot proposition. So that's how I balance the fairness of it. But so the point being is that the enemies aren't going to just march in like fodder, like you say, popcorn enemies. I'm not doing that. Every enemy that you fight has some fortuitousness to it. You could imagine there was an early version of Alien versus Predator that not a lot of people. It was for the console, I believe. I believe it was for PlayStation 1. Not the arcade Alien versus Predator by Capcom, which is an excellent game, by the way. But it was a PlayStation port of Alien versus Predator, and you played it as a Predator. And what was crazy is that your life bar, the Alien life bars were the same length as yours. and they actually had the same stamina that you did. And I thought that was really interesting for the game. It was very unusual that the enemy had such a long, because I'm used to, if you play a bust 'em up or beat 'em up from Capcom, unless you're fighting a boss, the goon enemies, the goons that come on, the fodder enemies that you have to fight through, the chaff, as it were, those guys always had like little short bars, and maybe you got a mid boss that had a longer bar. But Alien versus Predator on the PS1, you go to punch and you're the Predator, you go to punch an alien, and its life bar is as long as yours. And I'm like, holy shit, and it's just standard issue. And so that's how the enemies are going to be in my game, and they're going to have an appreciable amount of stamina to them, but not like a Euro shmup stamina. That I hear you on that. That's insipid. I wouldn't do that to the player. There will be density. We're not talking about 2 or 3 characters on the screen. Screen's going to be populated with bad guys, but they're going to have an appreciable stamina. They're not just going to pop like popcorn. You hit them twice.
What's coming to my mind that could work is when you do in Star Fox 64, when you do the Team Wolf or whatever, right, Wolf Squadron fight, where you fight them and you have to fight all 4 of them. What makes that work is because they're really the difference between like a Euro shmup and something like that is Euro shmups have bullet spongy enemies, but they're also really simple and they're not really doing all that much. Whereas with the Wolf fight, you're only fighting 4 dudes, but they're very sophisticated in terms of what their AI is. They're flanking you, they're dog fighting around you, they're surrounding you. So it's still a very intense fight. Yeah. So that's what I'm kind of picturing is maybe something like that, where they're more beefy enemies, but to kind of justify their existence, they need to be a little bit more sophisticated.
Absolutely,
what they do.
Yeah, and so they're going to be dodging. They're going to get that. Like in some cases, what I'd like to do in terms of the AI, they'll be aggressive, but I think here's what I'm going to reward the gamer, and they're going to have to discover this during gameplay. And I'm spoiling for anybody who's, I want this to be a first-time experience for people to break away from the usual tropes, as we agreed on with the arcade shooter, is that when you start hammering down on certain enemies, if you are brutal enough, the other enemies will take notice and they will avoid you more. And you'll notice it if you play this game right. You'll notice that the enemies will do a better job of staying away from you and keeping their distance. When they see you hammer in on one of their colleagues and eviscerate them, that's when they'll know, like, yeah, this guy means business. And they'll try to be a little bit more, they're not going to be as clandestine. They're not going to try to gang up on you. You're going to be able to scatter them away like crows in the field. They'll still attack, of course. But at that point, Mark, they're going to be trying to survive, not necessarily trying to intimidate you. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, of course, when you get to mid-bosses and their cronies, that's a different prospect because they're being ordered to engage you, and they're going to have to encroach on you. But the common stock enemy, you can scare them. You can put the fear of God in them. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's how I'm going to be rewarding. See, so I give it and I take it away. Am I making sense? Some of the things I'm taking from you, but I'm giving you something else to make up for that shot of endorphin.
I think that could be really interesting if there was a sort of, like, it could work really well or it could be a total disaster. It could work well if there was a sort of push and pull between offensive and defensive play, so that, like, for example, these enemies would flee from you, if you really blow the shit out of their comrade, but they would also sort of like trail waiting to strike so that you have an incentive to hunt them down.
Yes.
But so I can see that being really, really engaging, but I could also see it being a complete nightmare if it's like they just run away from you the whole time.
No, you're correct. You're correct.
Chasing them around.
I think what they do is call for backup, and then now you're introducing. Now now what was that shooter that you were talking? Was it you or someone else was talking about a shooter from Compile, where it just, as you got more powerful, the game got more powerful, and it was just like it's like, what's the point in me getting power ups with the game getting as powerful? I'm suggesting.
There's a lot of shmups like that. Rank.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that necessarily, but they will call for backup. If you start wailing on them, then they're going to call a more elite force. In fact, what's going to happen is this is how it's going to look. Again, I'm going back to Star Wars for visual. Boba Fett had this sort of way about him where he would just stand in the background and wait. He'd watch the cronies do their things, and then when it was time for him to step in, he'd step in. Am I making sense? But in the back, he's just chilling in the background holding his rifle because he's not going to bother with this. What is this little Jedi kid from Tatooine, whatever, you know? But then when he starts slicing the shit out of people, Boba Fett has to, I got to step in and shut this kid down. That will be mini bosses throughout the game. They'll be off in the background just chilling. They'll be sending their cronies to go after you, and they'll just be watching you and learning your patterns, learning your defenses, and learning your offenses, and then they come in and move on you. And that's going to be very jarring for a player. They're not going to be used to that. And the bosses will be relentless. They will chase you down. Now, what I'm getting at, I'm building up on here's my major crescendo. If you were to survive this long and we're able to be cool with what I'm saying, this next thing is going to be the most controversial, I'm sure. I'm not doing a score. You're not getting points. I take it that away. You're not going to get, if I'm not having the points pop up when you blow up an enemy, I'm not doing a running score. So really what I'm getting at is, I'm sure you're familiar with the Dark Souls series, right? Dark Souls?
Absolutely.
There's no score in Dark Souls. You kill an enemy, you get experience points, but it's not like a leaderboard comes up and you're like, oh yeah, I ranked first in Dark Souls. You know what I'm saying? You're just basically trying to survive. That's my game. I'm going to be the Dark Souls of shmups. I know that sounds campy, but that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I want the player to understand that survival is the reward. How long you survive, how many missions you complete, how many upgrades you can do to your player character. That's going to be the system of metric. It's not going to be some arbitrary, well, I blew this guy up and he's 150 points and this other guy's 1,000 points. I'm not doing that. And that, I think, will be the absolute most controversial aspect of the game I'm developing, and dare call it a shooter or a shmup. People are like, well, damn, what did you do with the score? Screw you, man. Well, I mean, here's my argument for that. We are both old school arcade dudes. The one thing you couldn't post on the leaderboard is your one credit clear, correct? I couldn't post that back in the day because it was ephemeral. It was more like, hey, I got 5 million points and I got to the top of the leaderboard. But if you had the ability to back in the day to say, hey, Mark cleared Raiden with 1/4, that would be an awesome thing. You see what I'm saying? To celebrate. This guy made it through on run credit. That's your win. That's the ultimate trophy here that I'm trying to get the player to understand, is your 1 credit clear. What do you say to that? That's got to be probably the most controversial decision I'm going to make as a developer.
Yeah, there are actually quite a few shmups kind of like that. A lot of the console shmups, their scoring systems are so trivial that no one gives a shit about them at all. But the problem that runs up with that, and I'm not saying you necessarily need a score system necessarily though, but the problem that you run into is, where do you get the replayability from? Because some players are incredibly skilled, like they're beasts, and they will, no matter how hard you try, they will cruise through your game like in an afternoon. They got it. They did it. And so what pulls them back? What brings them back now that they've done it?
That's a fair question. I didn't want to get too far in it. I will, out of respect, to answer your question. And again, it goes into design. The game will be mission-based. That's one. The missions, as you complete one mission, it alters what mission you can take after that. So it's emergent. So it's all based on your decisions. So you play through one time, you take this one mission, it sets you up for other missions. There's one mission in the game, for example, where you have there's a person in desperate need and they're wanting protection from the big bad government, right? And so you're sent as a dispatch to help her not be picked on and bullied by this big bad government. But then your comm is hacked by the government and says, hey, we'll pay you double if you kill her. You take her out for us, we'll pay you double. That decision right there, number one, gives you in terms of storytelling, allows the player a sense of moral ambiguity. So you play as a mercenary or a bounty hunter. Those are the two characters you can play as. Because I didn't want to tell the person you're a good guy. I don't want to tell the player that. You're whatever guy you want to be. Good guy, bad guy. I don't give a damn. I'm just going to give you the tools to engage your enemy. You decide your fate. You decide your path. And so in that particular mission, if you want to play the good guy route and protect her, then sure, you're more of a good guy, but you made an enemy of this big bad government. Do you get where I'm coming from? However, if you play the heel and take that double the earnings, hey, kill her, blow her up. I don't give a shit. Now you're more of a jerk, and now you have a reputation in the game. So your reputation goes, and that's your repayability. I'm going to build that into the game based on your decisions or the missions that you take. That's where you get your replayability. I'm going to say again, giveth and taketh away. Nothing, and I guess that's a fair thing for me to say, Mark, is everything I'm suggesting I'm taking away, I'm making sure to giveth, cornucopia and bounty in return. I'm going to give you something to reward you for having taken away like a scoring system. So now you go back and play, well, I'm going to try this other mission that I didn't take before and see where that road takes me. And you get a completely different outcome from the time you played it before. I'm hoping to have as many as, especially starting out, I'm very ambitious as a developer, but I'm thinking as many as maybe, there's going to have to be at least anywhere between 12 and 20 missions. I'm wanting to land on 20, but if I can get about 12 of them, 12 to 15 missions, I think I'm good. Because your average shmup is what, 7 levels? 6 or 7 levels?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I got to have enough variety then if you didn't take one mission, that there's another mission you could take and still get in maybe 6 or 7 missions and have a unique game because based on your decisions that you've made. So
one thing to consider that sort of modern games don't have arcade style scoring systems typically anymore. But what they do still have, at least the Japanese ones, is they came up with an alternative of ranking systems.
Yes.
It sounds like that would be a really natural fit for your game. So, for example, a game you wouldn't even think about score play in, but it kind of has it, is Metal Gear Solid 5 has ranking.
right.
Well, and it's based on like how quickly, how many people did you kill, and like these other various parameters. It's not necessarily the same thing as like an arcade straight up score system.
Correct.
But I could see that being, especially it being level based, being mission based, that being very compelling because then it would give the game like, oh, I'm trying to S rank all the stages. And
Right.
you'll find with a lot of modern games they have ranking systems rather than straight up arcade systems. That could be something that would fit.
It does, and you're correct. And that it's a giveth on my part. I personally, what I would do, you inspired me, and it just occurred to me I could do this. A ranking system will be the normal way to play. Now I do have a special. At first I was thinking I wasn't going to do again, I'm doing a lot of controversial decisions here in terms of I don't want to do difficulty setting. I think I can do away with that because you play my game, it's just difficult. I'm not going to give you an easy mode. I'm just not. There's one mode. There's an arcade mode and a story mode. That's it. And that I'm not going to give you a difficulty curve because I'm going to give you the tools necessary to beat the enemy down. They're going to be formidable, yes, but you're not going to go in there. You're not going to be a pussy going into it. I'm not going to make you. I'm not going to nerf you going into it. But that being said, in terms of ranking, having what you just said compelled me to go ahead and say, well, I will stick to sort of ranking. How, like you said, what's your ability? How much did you earn each mission? Are you S rank? Are you good? How good of a soldier are you? But I will now have a mode based on this conversation that says a 1cc mode. What does that say? It doesn't give a shit about how you perform. Just make it to the end. And
oh yeah, like a survival mode.
Yeah.
And then if you die, it resets the whole mode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I appreciate this conversation. I'm bowing my head and giving the prayer hands to you, bowing my head, thanking you for that because I was struggling with the thought of, okay, I want to giveth, I want that one CC to be, there will be one person that plays this game, Blasternal, and they're gonna play, like you said, they're gonna play it through and get the real ending, because they will have taken all the paths, they'll have played as both characters and made it through and got the quote real ending, but do that in a context of being a 1 credit clear, and they'll be in a special rank of people that will be forever known as being the first people to crack this game, i.e., it is very much a Dark Souls proposition. There are still YouTube videos of people out there trying to survive that game. That's very much how I want my shmup to be. It's going to be legendary in that, and how people have to figure out how to survive this game. It's going to be about survival versus, well, how much did I score? How much did I rank? No, did you make it through the mission? Damn, how did you do it? Because I couldn't do it, because it was once dude came out, I was done. I couldn't take him down. And so that's more of what I'm getting at. So that's the, in terms of now, let's review crossover appeal. I'm hoping to steal very much from Dark Souls. That's really my inspiration for how I'm going to approach, the reward system, and how you benefit from the game is, did I survive? Was I able to make it through? And I'm going to have some really mean bosses. Dark Souls is known for its just hellacious bosses. That's going to be this game. And there's going to be plenty of them throughout each level. There's going to be several of them. You're like, what the hell? Bosses are coming out of that. And these are, and can I say this? We all know the difference between an in-level boss and a mid-boss. I'm going to blur that line. It's because what I'm saying is this: you have a mission, and there's a mission parameter, but throughout the mission there are going to be bosses, plural. There'll be mid-bosses and bosses, plural. Am I making sense? Okay, y'all. I'm ending the interview there. I don't want to spoil too much about the game. We go very deep into both my game and the game Mark's developing. If you want to know more about that, just keep on following the blog. Keep on following Mark at the Electric Underground. Thank you for listening. Appreciate your feedback if you have it. Have a good one. Take care.